Two saboteurs involved in the recent railway bombing in Poland have fled to Belarus, but Polish services are detaining more people involved in the attempted terrorist attack on the Warsaw-Lublin railway line. Several people have been detained. These individuals are being questioned. The role of each person in this terrorist attack is being determined. This is probably the largest investigation in Polish history. All services are involved, including the Central Anti-Corruption Bureau. Even the American NSA and the European agencies Europol and Interpol have been asked for help. This is another joint action to build common security. This is another action to show that police officers, border guards, and firefighters will cooperate with the military and are cooperating with the military. After saboteurs cooperating with the Russian services almost caused the death of hundreds of Polish train passengers, they fled to Belarus. It is unlikely anyone will be willing to extradite them from there. Let's be reasonable and mature. We know the nature of the Belarusian regime. It is a regime that imprisons thousands of people, including our compatriots, and it is a regime that is already refusing to hand over the identified murderer of a Polish soldier. We can and should expect further incidents. Recent events prove that we live in times when we must pay much more attention to security. The intentions of the Russian Federation remain unchanged, and the events of recent weeks paint a broad picture of potential events that may occur. The European Union has also addressed the issue of the weekend acts of sabotage on the Polish railways.
I start with the Monday's attack on Polish railway track, which highlights the unprecedented risk to European transport infrastructure. Russia's attacks have become increasingly brazen.
Unfortunately, every such incident confirms the pessimistic forecast of the commander of US and NATO forces in Europe. In July, in an interview with the German newspaper Bild, General Alexis Grinkowicz warned that the North Atlantic Alliance countries have about a year and a half to prepare for war with Russia and China. 2027 could be a potential crisis year. Let's be clear. The opinion of the commander-in-chief of NATO forces in Europe is that in 2027, the Russian Federation may attack NATO countries, among them Poland. A few days ago, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk repeated this warning about the impending war in Poland in the pages of Gazeta Wyborcza. General Alexis Grinkowicz, commander of NATO forces in Europe, recently visited Warsaw. I spoke with him and asked him very pointedly whether he could confirm that we should be prepared for serious and possibly dramatic events as early as 2027. The general takes this possibility very seriously. Everything seems to indicate that the attempted attack on trains in Poland is precisely such a step towards full-on war with Russia. The adversary has begun preparations for war. It is building a particular environment here that is intended to undermine public confidence in the government and institutions such as the armed forces and the police, to create conditions conducive to potential aggression on Polish territory. General Kukuła shows that we are in a state of danger between an actual threat and war, something that is very difficult for us to name. If we look at digital threats, it is already a state of war. If we look at the area of special services, war. Intelligence, war. If we look at hybrid activities, we are probably already further along. It seems so because the police in Katowice are reporting a probable further attempt at sabotage on the railroads. A break-in into the track monitoring system box and the theft of batteries have been reported there. The Internal Security Agency, among others, is dealing with the matter. But the military is also responding. As part of Operation Horizon, 10,000 soldiers will be sent to guard train tracks. We are presenting Operation Horizon, support by the Polish Armed Forces, pursuant to specific articles on the functioning of the police, security measures, critical infrastructure protection, and joint patrolling. Donald Tusk, in turn, proposed a temporary ceasefire between Poland's major internal political factions. From this place, I would like to appeal for us to hold out at least until 2026, since what happens this year will determine the future for all of us and our homeland. On the same day, at roughly the same time, Tusk's deputy prime minister and head of Polish diplomacy, Radosław Sikorski, attacked opposition-aligned President Karol Nawrocki for his speech on Polish Independence Day. Mr. President, you have the right to your nationalist views. If you want to put them into practice, however, you should have run for the position of Prime Minister. Instead of dealing with the perpetrators, instead of securing Polish infrastructure, Tusk's government's first priority is insulting their political opponents, not the Russian Federation or Vladimir Putin. Our government's reaction is not what it should be, because we are seeing a reaction where the authorities are trying to cover up their helplessness and weakness by attacking the president and the opposition. The Polish authorities have also announced that what happened over the weekend near Garwolin Lublin and Puławy will not go unanswered. The Russian consulate in Gdańsk has already been closed. It was the last such facility operating in Poland. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte assured that he is in constant contact with the Polish authorities, but added that for now, we must wait for the results of the investigation. Hybrid warfare, in which Russia specializes, consists of covert but intensifying attacks against the enemy. This is exactly how the aggression against Ukraine began in 2014, when Crimea was seized by so-called Little Green Men, Russian soldiers in green uniforms without national insignia.
Regardless of the weather, location, or circumstances, Polish soldiers, together with their American counterparts, practice various scenarios for repelling enemy attacks.
These boys put in the work. They went out there and they showed any other country that would even think to do anything against NATO that they probably don't want to.
Since the beginning of the full-scale war in Ukraine, more than 10,000 American troops have been stationed in our country. Tank crews, airmen, and infantrymen are serving in Poland. Their role is to be in Poland to show that the United States is Poland's ally and to prevent the Russians from even thinking about attacking us. The Americans are closely watching recent events in Poland. The head of the U.S. Armed Services Committee, Republican Senator Roger Wicker, had no doubt that the response to the recent sabotage would be significant. What is happening goes beyond Ukraine and Russia and is important for the whole world, and the world is watching. Dictators, war criminals, would-be dictators are watching what we will do, because the way we respond to this kind of provocation in a country that is our NATO partner will be very, very significant. Security and cooperation between Warsaw and Washington were also the main topics of conversation between the newly appointed U.S. ambassador to Poland, Tom Rose, and Polish presidential minister, Marcin Przydacz. It was a great honor to meet with Marcin Przydacz, head of the International Policy Bureau of the Polish president. We have made real progress in supporting President Trump's efforts to strengthen U.S.-Polish relations. Thanks to our great partners here in Poland, our relations are growing stronger with every step. In response, Minister Przydacz referred, among other things, to the photos taken when Polish President Karol Nawrocki was invited to talks in the Oval Office, less than a month after his inauguration. Thanks to President Nawrocki's visit to Washington, we have received assurances that other countries do not have when it comes to the American presence. Just look at Romania and other countries. This cooperation and the good personal relations between the two presidents are yielding results. Donald Trump has declared that the U.S. will not withdraw its troops from Poland, and in a recent interview with British television station GB News, he said the following about Polish President Karol Nawrocki.
Poland's been great, and the man who won the election, who's fantastic, was not expected to even come close. It was one of many people running. And through a friend of his and a friend of mine, a mutual friend, I endorsed him and he won the election. Yeah. So it was a pretty big upset, but he's fantastic. He's going to be a great president.
Polish lobbying and pressure from Central and Eastern European countries are already visible in the White House. The U.S. is tightening its stance towards the Kremlin. Donald Trump has supported 500% sanctions on countries buying Russian oil, and the Pentagon is planning to deliver Tomahawk long-range missiles. At least 25 people were killed and over 115 wounded in a Russian attack overnight. Damage and casualties were reported in Kharkiv and Kiev, but also near the Polish border, including in Ternopil and Lviv. Ukraine responded with missile strikes on the invaders' military infrastructure. 476 drones and 48 missiles flew in from Russian territory. Residents of the Ukrainian capital are already accustomed to spending long hours, mostly at night, in subway stations. They are worse than fascists. I don't know what would have to happen for them to stop. I don't know. It's a bit surreal. I just don't understand them. It's scary when you look at the hole in the ground where a house once stood. Their goal is to destroy the nation, to destroy Ukrainians. You fear for your life and want to feel safe, but it's very difficult at home, so you have to go to a shelter, regardless of how you feel. In Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, 32 people were wounded in the attack, including 2 children. Kharkiv, located about 30 kilometers from the Russian border, defended itself in the first weeks of the full-scale invasion in February 2022 and has since been the target of almost daily airstrikes on residential areas and infrastructure. I live on the 3rd floor. I was standing by the window when the drone flew in. It was incredibly loud. I ran into the hallway. Then it hit. The shockwave knocked me over. I fell on broken glass, got up, and started looking for my loved ones. The attack took place in a typical residential area with apartment buildings, shops, a school, and a kindergarten. Before midnight, the enemy carried out about 10 drone attacks on residential areas in the center of Kharkiv. Explosions occurred almost every minute. No fatalities have been reported, but the number of injured continues to rise. The highest number of casualties and injuries is in Ternopil. Ballistic missiles and drones hit residential buildings. Local websites reported explosions in the cities of Ivano-Frankivsk and Khmelnytsky. My son is still in his apartment on the 9th floor. I spoke to him on the phone before the explosions. He said, "Mom, everything will be fine, don't worry." Then I tried to call him, but I don't know what happened to him. With winter approaching, Ukrainian forces must double their efforts in technological innovation and fill the front lines with more drones to halt Moscow's territorial gains. The war resources of Ukraine and Russia are not proportional. We have significantly less. That is why we must wage war technologically. This means classic drones, but also land drones and artillery. Ukraine attacked Russia for the first time using 4 state-of-the-art ATACMS systems after the Trump administration lifted restrictions on Kiev's use of these weapons. The Ukrainian attack targeted military facilities in Voronezh. The Russian side claims that all missiles were shot down. According to reports by Axios, the U.S. administration is conducting secret talks with Russia on ending the war in Ukraine. The peace plan is to include a cessation of hostilities, security guarantees for Kiev, security in Europe, and future U.S. relations with Russia and Ukraine. It is unclear how the disputed territorial issues concerning eastern and southern Ukraine would be resolved. Hence the urgent visit to Kiev by 2 leading representatives of the U.S. military. Secretary Dan Driscoll and Chief of Staff General Randy George are to meet with Ukrainian President Zelensky immediately after his return from Turkey, where talks were held on resuming the exchange of prisoners with Russia.
China is reacting furiously to the U.S. decision to provide military support to Taiwan. The White House gave the green light to the delivery of missile systems and components for fighter jets. China is also reacting with increasing aggression towards Japan, whose new prime minister has declared that a possible invasion of Taiwan could be an existential threat for Japan. This week, nearly 10 million copies of the first ever civil defense manual are to be distributed to the residents of Taiwan. The manual contains government information on safety and incident response for all citizens. We will develop plans so that every home can receive this safety guide in the future. The reason is clear. There are growing concerns about the possibility of not just a blockade, but open war and invasion of Taiwan by China. Therefore, in addition to raising public awareness, the Taiwanese government is also investing in the expansion of its defense systems. Raytheon Co. Tewksbury, Massachusetts was awarded a $698,948,760 firm fixed-price contract for the procurement of National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile System fire units. Work will be performed in Tewksbury, Massachusetts with an estimated completion date of February 28, 2031. This is yet another decision by the USA in recent weeks to support Taiwan with arms supplies. In addition to NASAMS missile systems, parts and weapons for fighter jets are also to be delivered to Taiwan. China is reacting hysterically. The Taiwan issue is at the core of China's interest and is the first red line that cannot be crossed in Sino-US relations. China calls on the US side to earnestly adhere to the One China principle. The Americans are balancing on a diplomatic tightrope between supporting Taipei and trying to establish trade relations with Beijing. Unexpectedly, Tokyo has joined the game somewhat accidentally, finding itself at the center of Asian geopolitics. Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi has said publicly that Japan would consider a Chinese invasion of Taiwan a real threat. If China sent destroyers and used force, I believe it could be considered a situation threatening Japan's survival. Although this statement is obvious, for Beijing it is the gravest insult. The Chinese Navy sent its ships towards Japanese waters, and diplomats threatened serious consequences. In my opinion, this is an additional pretext. It is not about the statement itself, but about Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. She is a conservative who sees China as the greatest threat in the region. She is described as a China hawk, a politician who wants to take a tougher stance towards China, and is also in favor of strengthening the alliance with the United States. As a result, Japanese companies are being boycotted in retaliation, and the Japanese themselves are leaving China en masse. The Chinese, in turn, are canceling trips to Japan and avoiding expensive Japanese restaurants. We have been greatly affected by recent events. Yesterday, we canceled about 6 group reservations, which is about 10%. Today, we canceled another 10. So a total of about 20 reservations have been canceled. This represents about 80% of our market this year. The Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs has warned its citizens in China to try to leave the country, and if this is not possible, to avoid leaving their homes and talking to Chinese people, at least in the coming days. The Japanese Prime Minister may ask Washington for help in resolving the situation. Donald Trump is working to calm tensions around Taiwan and at least maintain the status quo. But he has repeatedly stated that Chinese aggression will be met with a decisive response from the United States.